The bustling streets of Manhattan had always been a whirlwind of movement, noise, and energy. It was a city that never slept, never slowed, and rarely noticed the individual struggles that played out within its vast, concrete labyrinth. But on this particular day, there was something different in the air. The December wind was merciless, slicing through the avenues like a sharpened blade, weaving between the towering skyscrapers and chilling the hurried pedestrians to the bone. The scent of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor mixed with the crisp winter air, creating a strange contrast. Warmth in the middle of an unforgiving cold. Among the crowd, a man moved unsteadily. His tattered coat hung loosely from his gaunt frame. His shoes worn to the soles, barely shielding his feet from the icy pavement. His face, pale and drawn, bore the weight of exhaustion and suffering. His breath came in uneven gasps, visible in the frosty air. And then, without warning, his legs buckled beneath him. He collapsed onto the hard pavement, his body curling inward as though trying to shield itself from the world. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to hesitate. The ever-moving sea of people stilled just enough for glances to be exchanged, for whispers to pass between onlookers. Some paused, curiosity momentarily overriding their schedules. A few reached for their phones, capturing the scene in pixels rather than offering aid. The city had conditioned them to distance, to disengage. A sleek black limousine came to a halt nearby, its presence almost unnoticed in the commotion. The tinted windows reflected the gray sky, masking the occupant within. But when the door swung open, the air shifted. From within stepped Barron Trump. His presence was striking, his tall frame a stark contrast against the bleak city backdrop. Dressed impeccably in a tailored coat and cashmere scarf, he exuded an air of affluence, of control. He was a name everyone knew, a symbol of privilege, of inherited power. The city had formed its own opinions of him, a man born into wealth, untouched by the struggles of the common world. No one expected him to notice the fallen man. No one expected him to care. But he did, his sharp blue eyes locked onto the frail figure curled on the ground. Something flickered in them, not the usual detachment, not the rehearsed apathy that came with wealth. This was something raw, something real, a feeling he couldn't quite place, but one he couldn't ignore. Without hesitation, Barron moved forward, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. He crouched beside the man, his hand firm but gentle as it gripped the stranger's trembling shoulder. "Call 911, he commanded, his voice steady yet edged with urgency. His driver, caught off guard by the order, fumbled for his phone. The onlookers murmured, their whispers thick with speculation. Why was he stopping? Why was he helping? The man on the ground struggled to lift his gaze, his lips parted, but the words that emerged were barely above a whisper. "Help me." Barron's expression softened, the usual cold precision in his demeanor replaced by something entirely unfamiliar. "I've got you," he assured, his voice lower now, quieter. The murmurs in the crowd grew, a ripple of intrigue spreading through the gathered onlookers. Was this just another PR stunt? A carefully orchestrated performance? Or was there something more beneath the polished surface? Within minutes, the wail of sirens sliced through the winter air. Paramedics rushed forward, expertly maneuvering through the throng of bystanders. Barron stepped aside, but didn't move away, his gaze locked onto the frail man as they lifted him onto the stretcher. And then something caught his eye. A crumpled piece of paper slipped from the man's pocket, fluttering toward the ground like a discarded fragment of a forgotten story. Instinctively, Barron reached for it, his fingers brushing against the cold pavement as he retrieved it. The paper was weathered, the edges torn, the ink smudged in places. He unfolded it carefully, his breath hitching as his eyes scanned the words hastily scrawled across its surface. To anyone who finds this, I'm sorry I failed. Please take care of my daughter. Her name is Lily. Barron's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The city around him blurred, the noise fading into a distant hum. The words on the page seemed to sear into his mind, demanding his attention, demanding action. Lily. A name. A plea. A responsibility. His fingers tightened around the note as his mind raced. Who was this man? Where was Lily? Why did this feel so personal, so urgent? The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the vehicle lurched forward, its sirens wailing as it disappeared into the chaotic Manhattan streets. Barron exhaled sharply, his decision made before he could even question it. Follow the ambulance, he instructed his driver, his tone leaving no room for argument. The limousine merged into traffic, its smooth glide a stark contrast to the turmoil in Barron's chest. He stared out the window, the city flashing past in a blur of neon lights and faceless crowds. For years, the world had seen him as a name, a title, a reflection of wealth and privilege. They whispered about him, judged him, defined him without ever knowing him. But this was different. This wasn't about status or power. This wasn't about reputation. This was about doing the right thing. And he had no idea that this choice, this one moment of unexpected compassion, would alter the course of his life forever. The hospital was a stark contrast to the world he knew. It smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation, of stories unfolding behind drawn curtains and hushed voices. Barron sat stiffly in the waiting room, his presence both out of place and oddly resolute. Nurses passed by, stealing curious glances at him, but he ignored them. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here for answers. The minutes stretched into an eternity before a doctor finally emerged from the double doors, his expression unreadable. Barron was on his feet in an instant, his stance poised but tense. How is he? Barron Trump stood in the stark white hospital hallway, his hands curled into fists at his sides. The antiseptic scent clung to the air, mingling with the quiet hum of medical machines behind closed doors. He wasn't sure why he was here, why he still felt so unsettled after witnessing the man collapse on the streets of Manhattan. He had done his part, hadn't he? He had ensured the man received medical attention, and that should have been the end of it. And yet, the crumpled note in his pocket felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried a weight beyond mere ink and paper. A doctor emerged from the patient's room, flipping through a clipboard. Barron straightened, his sharp blue eyes scanning the man's expression for any sign of bad news. The doctor glanced up, surprised to see him still waiting. Stable for now, the doctor said, his tone neutral but tinged with fatigue. But he's malnourished and suffering from exhaustion. Do you know him? Barron hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. Not really. But I found this. He retrieved the note from his pocket and handed it to the doctor. The doctor's brow furrowed as he read the shaky handwriting. His daughter? He hasn't mentioned a daughter. Barron felt his jaw tighten. Can I see him? The doctor hesitated, then gave a nod. Make it brief. Barron stepped into the dimly lit hospital room, his usual confidence faltering as he took in the sight before him. The man lay on the bed, his face pale and sunken, his breathing shallow but steady. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped softly in the background. He looked so frail, like a strong wind could carry him away. Barron approached the bedside cautiously. For years, people had regarded him as untouchable, aloof, distant, disinterested in the struggles of those outside his privileged world. But this was different. Something about this man, about the desperate plea scrawled on that piece of paper, struck a chord deep within him. The man stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing dull, weary eyes. He blinked slowly, his gaze trying to focus on Barron, and then his lips parted. "Lily." His voice was barely a whisper, a fragile thread of hope. Barron's chest tightened. "Where is she?" he asked gently. Tears welled in the man's eyes, tracing weak paths down his hollow cheeks. "Alone," he murmured. "Promise me. You'll find her." Barron leaned in, his voice firm with conviction. "I promise." The man's eyes fluttered shut again, as if the last of his strength had been spent on those few words. Barron straightened, inhaling deeply. He didn't make promises lightly, and he sure as hell didn't break them. He left the hospital with a heavy heart and a mission that burned in his mind. Who was Lily? Was she safe? He couldn't shake the desperation in the man's voice, the sheer terror in his fading gaze. He had to find her. Tracking down the man's identity was easy enough. With his last name and ID from the hospital, Barron found an address listed under his name. It was a small, run-down apartment building in a neglected part of the city, where streetlights flickered uncertainly and the scent of dampness clung to the air. The elevator creaked as it carried him to the 4th floor. He stepped into a dimly lit hallway, where peeling paint curled away from the walls like old parchment. Apartment 4C. Barron stood before the door, his pulse quickening slightly. He wasn't sure what he expected. A frightened child? An empty apartment? He knocked firmly, the sound echoing down the silent corridor. A pause. Then a small, hesitant voice called from inside. "Who is it?" Barron's breath caught. A child. He steadied his voice. "I'm here to help." For a moment there was only silence. Then the door creaked open a fraction, revealing a pair of wide, fearful eyes, peeking up at him. A little girl, no older than 6, stared at him with a mix of suspicion and uncertainty. Her dark hair was tangled, and her face bore smudges of dirt. Clutched tightly in her small hands was a stuffed bunny, its ear nearly torn off. Barron crouched down, making himself smaller, less intimidating. "Are you Lily?" She nodded, her lip trembling slightly. "Where's Daddy?" Barron hesitated. How did you tell a child that her father was fighting for his life in a hospital bed? "He's in the hospital," he said gently. "But he's going to be okay." Her grip on the bunny tightened. "Is he sick?" Barron nodded. "A little, but he's getting help." Lily's eyes searched his face as if trying to determine if he was telling the truth. Then she stepped back slightly, just enough for him to see inside. The apartment was small, dimly lit, and sparsely furnished. A single blanket lay crumpled on the couch, and the sink overflowed with unwashed dishes. The place smelled faintly of old takeout and something stale, like loneliness settled into the very walls. "Can I come in?" Barron asked softly. Lily hesitated before nodding. She stepped aside, and Barron entered, taking in his surroundings. His chest tightened at the sight of an empty fridge, the bare cupboards. A small pile of unopened bills sat on the counter, their edges curled with neglect. He turned back to the little girl, who stood uncertainly by the couch, still clutching her stuffed bunny. "Have you been here alone?" She nodded again. "Daddy said to stay inside until he came back." "He always comes back." Barron exhaled slowly, pushing down the surge of anger he felt. Not at the father, but at the circumstances that had forced a man to leave his child alone, hungry, vulnerable. He lowered himself to her level. "Are you hungry, Lily?" She hesitated, then nodded, her small fingers tightening around the fabric of her bunny. Barron smiled gently. "How about I get us something to eat? Would that be okay?" Lily studied him for a long moment before nodding once more. It was a small step, a small trust, but it was enough. Barron pulled out his phone, dialing his driver. "Pick us up some food, something warm. Bring a few extra things, too." As he ended the call, he glanced back at Lily, who was watching him with cautious curiosity. He wasn't sure what had driven him here, why he felt such a deep pull toward this child and her father. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to walk away. Not this time. As Barron entered the tiny apartment, the weight of what he had taken on began to sink in. The air inside was heavy with neglect, the scent of damp wood and forgotten meals lingering like ghosts of hardship. Dim light from a flickering ceiling bulb barely illuminated the bare walls, cracked with time. The room was cold, too cold for a child to be living in. A single blanket lay rumpled on the couch, the only source of warmth in sight. Barron clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about finding Lily. It was about saving her. Lily stood a few feet away, clutching her bunny tighter. She was studying him, unsure, hesitant. Her little hands gripped the stuffed animal like it was her last anchor in a world that had given her nothing but loss. "Do you like pizza?" Barron asked, his voice soft, trying to ease the tension. Her eyes flickered with something. Hope, maybe. But she quickly looked down. "Daddy says we can't afford it." Barron knelt down to her level, his expression gentle but determined. "Well, today's special. Let's get pizza." For the first time, her lips curled slightly, a ghost of a smile breaking through the fear. Barron's chest tightened at the sight. How long had it been since this little girl had a reason to smile? Since she had a warm meal without worry? He placed an order, and as they waited, Lily sat quietly on the floor, her stuffed bunny still pressed against her chest. She looked at him with wary eyes, as if waiting for the moment when he, too, would disappear. "What's your bunny's name?" he asked. Lily hesitated, then mumbled, "Marshmallow. That's a great name. Looks like he's been on a lot of adventures." She nodded, tracing the bunny's worn ear with tiny fingers. "Daddy says he keeps me safe." Barron swallowed the lump forming in his throat. "Your daddy loves you very much. He's going to be okay." The doorbell rang, breaking the fragile moment. Barron grabbed the pizza and set it on the floor, gesturing for Lily to join him. She hesitated at first, but then scooted closer. The smell of warm cheese and fresh dough filled the tiny room. And for the first time that night, the air didn't feel so heavy. They ate together, Lily taking small bites at first, as if afraid it would be taken away. But soon, she was giggling as Barron pretended to fight her for the last slice. She wiped sauce from her chin with the back of her hand, her laughter filling the room like a melody he hadn't realized he needed it to hear. After dinner, Barron found an old but clean blanket and wrapped it around Lily before tucking her into the small, rickety bed in the corner of the room. She yawned, her eyelids drooping as she curled around Marshmallow. "You'll stay?" she murmured, her voice laced with sleep. Barron hesitated for only a second before nodding. "I'll stay." Her lips twitched in a sleepy, satisfied smile. Within moments, she was fast asleep. Barron watched her for a while, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, feeling an unfamiliar yet unshakable sense of responsibility settle deep within him. He had walked into this apartment a stranger, but he wasn't leaving as one. The wind howled outside, rattling the thin windows. Barron sat on the worn-out couch, unable to sleep. His thoughts churned, each one heavier than the last. The note, the desperation in the man's eyes, the way Lily had clung to her bunny, it all played over and over in his mind. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up the dark room. He hesitated before picking it up. "Barron." His father's voice was calm, calculated. "What's going on? You didn't come home tonight." Barron sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I found something important." A long pause. Then, "What kind of important?" Barron glanced at the sleeping child across the room, her tiny frame barely making a dent in the mattress. "I'll explain later." His father exhaled sharply. "You can't just disappear. People notice when you do." "I need to stay here." Another silence, heavier this time. "Just don't get yourself into something you can't handle." Barron didn't respond. He ended the call before more questions could come. He wasn't sure how to explain what had happened. Not yet. Leaning forward, he rested his elbows on his knees, rubbing his temples. This was more than just an act of kindness. This was a turning point. He had everything: wealth, power, security. Yet here was this little girl, alone in a freezing apartment with no one to fight for her. That wasn't something he could walk away from. His gaze drifted to the crumpled note still tucked inside his pocket. He pulled it out, smoothing the creases with his thumb. "To anyone who finds this, I'm sorry I failed. Please take care of my daughter. Her name is Lily." Barron exhaled slowly. He wasn't just going to take care of her tonight. He wasn't going to leave her behind, let her struggle the way she had been. This wasn't temporary. He had to find out the truth about her father, about why they were left in this state, and about why he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger, something darker, was yet to come.